Welcome to the Pod Like a Girl podcast with your host, Mia Findlay. This podcast is all about exploring and celebrating women's stories, voices, and experiences through bold and unapologetic conversations. Welcome back, everyone. Today is a solo episode because this is a topic I've been wanting to tackle for a while, mostly because I receive so many messages about it, comments, questions, and I think it's a really important topic for us to talk about, given it is still quite taboo, and the lack of these conversations was a huge issue for me in coming to the realization that I am somebody who wants to stay child-free by choice. This is something that I went through in 2024, where I really finally landed on this decision and did the work to unpack why I came to that decision. What were the barriers that had prevented me from really exploring it and being curious? And then what were all the factors which contributed to my ultimate decision to remain child-free by choice? And when I discovered women particularly talking about staying child-free by choice, it was a huge game changer. There were a couple of resources for me that made the world of difference. So I wanted to go through some of the more common questions I receive to unpack my process, my life as a child-free by choice woman, and to hopefully contribute to a little bit of this discussion, which I am so thrilled to see is picking up momentum and having more voices added to it. Obviously, it's not only women who have these considerations to take into account, but I am just speaking from my own experience. And as always, I would love to hear from all of you in the comments, whether on YouTube or Spotify. You can watch the video versions of these podcast episodes on Spotify and YouTube, and then there's just the audio version on Apple. But we'll do these solo ones occasionally when there's questions to ask, a topic we want to dive into, updates to give, etc. In terms of like updates in my life, just loving my new coastal beachy life, loving things slowing down externally, because my life online is pretty chaotic and pretty loud and pretty intense and sometimes scary. Not always, less and less so, with our beautiful, amazing community and how supportive you all are and encouraging. And I'm just so unbelievably grateful for all of you and your support on TikTok, your support here on the podcast, your support on Patreon, the fact that we have this beautiful community over there on Patreon with our book club and our catch-up live streams and our sort of community chat area, all getting to know each other. Like, it's just beautiful. That is probably one of my favorite spots that we've created together, which you can find all the links to below if you want to come and join our community over there. Some of the most smart, incredible, funny people I've ever had the privilege of getting to know. So life is very chill externally, very, very intense online. Some really exciting stuff though. I don't know how much detail I can give you, but some of my biggest dreams that I've had literally since I could have dreams and goals are coming true, especially in the literary department. If you know me, you know that my goal has always been to be an author and somebody who can hopefully work towards supporting myself by being an author. And that is happening. I got an email a few weeks ago and I was in the car with my mum bringing her back from the hospital from her knee replacement, and we picked up some bao buns on our way down. And we didn't have any napkins. All we had was like this big sheet in the back of the car. So we were sitting in the car. She's like off her rocker with pain medication. We've got this sheet over us. We're stuffing bao buns into our face. I looked at this email, burst into tears, told her this amazing news of this incredible publisher I'd heard from. She burst into tears, and this man walks past like, there's no way he could figure out what was going on. We're wearing a sheet like a shared bib and sobbing, eating bao buns. So as I am able to share in more and more detail, I will, but this is just my thank you to all of you for being a part of this incredible journey. It's next month. It will be a year since I uploaded the Fed Up poem. And that's where everything really started to take off in the women's issues, feminism, and safety spaces, which I'd already been working on in addition to my mental health and eating disorder recovery advocacy, but have really been obviously focusing so much on this area. And it's just been life-changing and hard and intense, but also extraordinary in so many ways. And you are so much a part of that. I will never adequately be able to express how much I appreciate this turn of events in my life. But wanted to get into the subject today because, like I said, it's one I'm really excited to talk about because it's something I feel quite passionate about, which is giving people all the information they need to make the best decision for themselves, not the decisions they think they should make, not building a life that looks the way they think it should look, but building a life which actually feels good, actually feels like the one they're connected to, regardless of all of the external pressures, societal pressures, familial pressures. And I learned this so intensely in my eating disorder recovery process. The absolute necessity of living life as authentically as you can, living life for you, not necessarily living just for you. I obviously am somebody who believes in living as part of a collective and being responsible for yourself and each other, but living ultimately guided by your values and your goals and how you want your life to feel, not how you just want it to look or think it should look. Because to me, that is the equivalent of owning the best house on the best street in the best suburb and not being able to afford to live there. Like, you can drive past and show people your house, which is the best on the street and looks the best from the outside, but you can't furnish it. You can't afford to turn the lights on. You can't afford to live there. So what is it worth if it just looks great or it looks the way that you think other people think it should look? Then what is it worth to you? What is the value of that? And especially when you have to fight for your life and come out swinging with something as insidious as anorexia, it is a real clarifier as far as what is the value of what other people think or living life for other people if it doesn't actually connect to how your life feels to be inside of it, right? So, first question here, what were some of the contributors to deciding to be child free? Was it something gradual for you, or did you just suddenly realize? So, the process for me was both gradual and also very all at once. I think it was kind of subconscious. It was something I didn't even really notice until I had to face it and really sit with it. So for me, I had never really wanted to have children. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of kids and teenagers who actively A, think about this stuff, or B, if they do, their first response is, oh my gosh, I can't wait to be a parent. Some do, but I don't think it's a common response from kids. So I hadn't really thought about it much. And then as I was going through my 20s, I really had come to the decision that no, I didn't want to be a parent. It wasn't for me. And then as I headed towards my 30s, something changed. Two major events really contributed to me suddenly having this quite major shift in my thinking around being a parent. One, I was diagnosed with stage 4 endometriosis. And two, my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So that all happened within a year of each other, I think. Dad was first diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer. And then I think it was within 12 months, I was diagnosed with stage 4 endometriosis. And when you are diagnosed with something like stage 4 endometriosis, very quickly your doctors, your specialists are going to be talking to you about your options as far as not just treatment, but fertility, because there is a lot that is not known about endometriosis, but something which is evident is that a lot of people with endometriosis, much like things like PCOS, they will struggle with fertility. So suddenly I was having these conversations about fertility and egg freezing and like the likelihood that I would be a mother when it was never something that had really been a concern for me before. If somebody had didn't take it off the table potentially, I would never really have thought about it very much. But at the age of 29, 30, I really had to think about it and I really had to take stock of whether or not that was something I wanted. But that process got interrupted because, like I said, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and he lived in America. So within a couple of years, my sister and I had moved over to the US, Massachusetts, where he lived, and we took care of him until he died. And then when I got home, it was only about 6 months later that I found my grandmother. She had passed away in her home. So I was the one to find her. So I lost two very close family members of mine. It was really just my mum left as far as a family member who I'm very close to. So 2/3 of my family gone, like close family members gone in 6 months. And I think that really changes your brain chemistry when you're thinking about things like family and you're thinking about your support system and your safety nets emotionally more than anything. And so I had these two things running parallel, my physical health being something that for the first time I had to think about through the lens of fertility and motherhood and, this urgency that was being put to me in terms of how I was thinking about that and planning for that and preparing for that. And then this urgency as far as feeling like was lacking family and lacking that safety net and that security blanket, and all of that being wrapped up with things like CPTSD, with this just this gathering of grief and trauma. And the way that my dad died was highly, highly traumatic, and the way I found my grandmother was highly, highly traumatic. So I was in this swirl of really poor mental health and trauma, and also having to think about family through this lens, and then having this biological consideration that I was having to process. And so suddenly my urgency and my certainty that I was going to be a parent shifted. I couldn't even tell you when or where or what day or whatever. It felt like that's how it was, and that's how it had always been. Even though now, with so much hindsight and most importantly trauma therapy, I can see there was a very rapid shift in my thinking about being a parent, about family, etc. And so then I was on the other side of all of that loss. And through this process, also obviously speaking to my specialists, I was going down the route of IVF and the preliminary stages of IVF in terms of freezing my eggs, and was working with a fantastic fertility specialist who was incredibly passionate about women's fertility. And the odd thing is that there's not a lot of reasons why I'm grateful for endometriosis, but one is that it has taught me a lot about women's fertility and how we need to think about it differently. And the fact that women, whether with fertility issues or otherwise, if you do want to be a parent, these things are really good things to think about. Egg freezing, IVF, because these days a lot of women are choosing to have children at later and later stages, which more power to them, especially if our medical and scientific advances make that possible. I really encourage women who are even considering whether or not they would want to be a parent to just explore. And obviously there's an enormous amount of financial privilege which can come with that. Again, a really odd thing to be grateful for when it comes to things like endo is that because there was endometriosis found in my ovaries, the government would subsidize that in a really, really hefty way. So my out of pockets for IVF and for egg freezing would have been minimal compared to the average person. So I do just want to acknowledge that accessing those kinds of services, accessing that kind of support can come with an enormous amount of privilege, financial privilege, access to healthcare, etc. Just want to acknowledge that. But for me, because of my particular kind of endometriosis, it was something that I had the freedom to explore and think about. So I think that it did teach me a lot about the realities of women's fertility and how we're sort of approaching these things differently these days in terms of timing, and that it is hopefully giving women a little bit more freedom and flexibility to make choices timing wise, or even having children by themselves, which was always something that I had considered and was, willing to organize my life in such a way that I could have a child by myself. And, I am somebody who is financially independent and who can structure my life however I need to. I can move wherever I need to make that more financially viable. So these are all things that I didn't just have to think about. I did think about them and did plan for them. And then as I moved through 2023, I started working through my trauma. I went to trauma therapy. I was working through EMDR. And as that trauma and the symptoms of trauma loosen their grip on me, I also noticed that I started to get very, very anxious whenever I thought about becoming a parent, whenever I had an upcoming appointment with my specialist, or something came across my social media feed about being a parent or having children. I would get incredibly anxious, and I misinterpreted that anxiety as I'm running out of time, and I need to really, decide when I'm going to do this and when I'm really going to, have this child. And I thought it was a timing issue from like, when am I going to be a parent? And what I can see now is it was my instinct saying, you, the time is running out as far as like, if you do this, there are no takesies backsies. There's no one doing this one, Mia. There's no whoops, return to sender. This will be it. And maybe this is not what you want. So I really had to pay attention to that anxiety and figuring out what it was, because it was the kind of anxiety that if I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, I couldn't get back to sleep. I would just stare at the ceiling and think about, like, ironic, like looking back, it's so obvious because I would think about my life with a child and it would terrify me and it would make me feel so sad and depressed and down, and I felt like I was being shoved in a box and like the lid was being closed. I just felt so claustrophobic and so trapped, which is always a sign for me that it is not the right choice for me, because I'm very free spirited. I'm very independent. I'd like to do what I want to do. I like to be where I want to be. I want to, be the captain of my own ship. I don't like being told what to do, even by myself. And I'm my own boss, so we run into trouble with that sometimes. But I was really, really, really panicked and really, really anxious. And so I just gave myself permission to just spend some time exploring both sides of the coin. And that's when I came across the Reddit page, Regretful Parents. And I would encourage anybody who is on the fence about wanting to be a parent to go and look at that Reddit, because it is very balanced. It is very fair. It is people who are given one of the only spaces and places anywhere, not just on the internet, but anywhere, to be able to, in an unvarnished way, talk about their parenting experiences all across the parenting spectrum, all across all the different facets which make that challenging or are not what they expected. And it is so illuminating. It's also a very compassionate place and a very caring place. And it can be a bit shocking. It can be a bit jarring. You have to go in with the decision that you are going to go into that space with a judgment-free and compassionate sort of lens. And it was so needed for me. I needed to see that, because as much as, yes, we're seeing more and more content, particularly from millennial women, which I'm so grateful for, because I think millennial women have been on the forefront of a lot of things that we have used social media for, whether or not it's showing the realities of mental health or our day-to-day lives or de-influencing or whatever it is. And now that millennial women have become parents, I feel like there is a lot more content talking about the realities of being a parent, but not to the extent of like regretting being a parent. For many of those parents, still loving their child, but regretting parenthood, not enjoying parenthood, really struggling with the role of parent and the loss of identity and the loss of all these things that I had just never even considered, because nobody's allowed to talk about it, right? Like, you think about a mother openly saying, I regret having children, I regret being a parent. Societally, she is going to be absolutely torn to pieces. So how that is what really scares me, is the lack of viewpoints and experiences which give people all the information they need to be able to make this decision for themselves and for their future potential prospective children and their partners and all those things, right? To be able to truly explore what this can look like, all the way through from the joyful, this is exactly what I wanted, this is exactly how I imagined it to be, and I would not take a second of it back, all the way through to this was not for me and I wish that somebody had given me this information. So finding that Reddit was unbelievably illuminating. And then really continuing to educate myself through different content creators. I found different child-free content creators who really, really spoke to me, especially my personality type. As much as I think I would be a good parent, I don't think I would enjoy being a parent. I think those two things can be very, very different. You can be a very good parent and you can also hate being a parent. And I think that would have been me. And I think we only look at very often whether or not we would be good at it versus our experience of it, right? Because that's how we talk about parents, good parents, bad parents, not about whether or not this is actually an experience that you want for yourself. So that's what I mean by it was gradual, because so much of it was subconscious, this gradual heading towards this place where within a couple of months, I had gone from, oh my God, what am I feeling? What is this anxiety? What is this uncertainty? What is this panic? to being absolutely certain that this was not the right life path for me. And it was absolutely evident that that was the right choice, because as soon as I said to myself, I want to be child free, everything improved. My mental health improved, my sleep improved. I felt hopeful again. I'd never felt more creative. I could see like the length and breadth of my life and all the different avenues it could take. And they all excited me and made me feel connected to myself and made me feel hopeful and fulfilled. And it just immediately started to make a difference in every single area of my life, and made every single area of my life feel more connected and feel more authentic. So that is the answer to that question, which is obviously a little bit of a journey, but it was both. It was, I think there was a subconscious part of me who was on this path of realization for a long time, but so much was getting in the way, my life experiences, my trauma, and then the ability to like give myself a pocket of time to really just dive in and come to grips with it. Next question. Are you child free because you don't like kids? For me, that is absolutely not a facet of my choice to stay child free. For other people, it is, and there's nothing wrong with that either. I don't think that there's any wrong way to be child free or any wrong reason to be child free. But for me, I love kids. I have my niece who I very proudly show and have all of her cards and all of her little artwork that she's done for me over the years. And she means the world to me. She is not my niece by blood, but she is the daughter of my best friend, Josie, who is my best friend of 32 years. And her daughter, my niece, just turned the age that we were when we became best friends at the age of 5. So for me, I love kids. I was the youngest on my mum's side of the family. And so I never really interacted with kids until family members of mine started having children. And then I just loved it. Like, you can be your silliest, most ridiculous self with them. They just, they think you're an idiot if you are an idiot. And they like just cut through the shit and they just tell it like it is. Love the creativity that you get to experience with them, and just watching them put things together in their world, in their head, in their sense of self. But I love that role. I love being the crazy, fun auntie who buys presents even when I've been told not to. I really don't do. I really do that with books, okay? Don't come at me about the, I understand parents, when you say no presents, you mean it, but books, you can't say no to a book, okay? That is, that's a you thing. That's not the crazy auntie's problem. But that role I love. I love being part of the village. I love being a cornerstone in somebody's village, not just in relation to like my relationship with their child, but my relationship with them as a parent, and then being able to also celebrate them and support them as the whole individual person they still are. They are still their own autonomous person, and we don't really let mums embrace that or be reminded of that. So I always want to be that person. I also have other friends who are going through things like fertility treatments and fertility issues, and being able to be supportive of that without them having to consider whether that's a problem for you, or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't not have children because I couldn't have them. That might have been the case. I never got to that point. But they don't have to be sensitive with me in a way that they might have to with other people. Just like if my girlfriends are struggling with, a certain area of parenthood, they don't have to edit themselves, because what the hell do I know? Like, who am I to judge them when I haven't been through that experience and there's nothing to compare to? So it's really nice to be that cheerleader, but also a little bit of a sounding board for your friends who do have children. But again, that is not an obligation that child free by choice people have. I think a lot of people then say, well, you have to be the village and you have to be that. Yes, we need more people being the village, just more broadly, whether it's for people who have children or just like, we need much more of a collective approach to society that we've lost so much of over the years. But just because you're child free doesn't mean that you are free childcare, or that you are this, person, if that doesn't suit you, if that's not a role that you want to fulfill. This one is a very, very common one. And sometimes it's asked genuinely, and sometimes it's asked as a scare tactic. Who will take care of you when you're old or sick? I think that this is where our depiction of family and depiction of being a parent and having children is very, very mismatched from a lot of people's reality, right? Just because you have children, doesn't mean that they are obligated to be your caretaker. And I think if anyone is having children, in part as an insurance policy to ensure that they have someone to take care of them, that might be an opportunity to reflect on why they're choosing to have children, because that's not really fair. That's not giving your child the ability to have autonomy and to make their own choices and to be self-determining beings, right? So I wouldn't, even if I did have children, I think if that was one of my reasons for having children, I would very quickly unpack that and try to discard that, because A, it's not fair, and B, it's just not a guarantee. I have spoken about this a few times on TikTok because, like I said, this is a common response from people when you say that you are child free by choice. And I have had many, many, many people who work in aged care services jump into my comments or stitch my videos to say, I've worked in aged care for a long time, and there are a lot of people who are in those aged care facilities who have a lot of family, a lot of children, ones who live close by, and they are not taken care of. And obviously they're in a facility, but they're not emotionally even taken care of. They're not visited as frequently as you would assume, like with a question like this, right? I think there's like even a case recently. We look at Gene Hackman, the actor who just passed away in his home, and his wife had passed away with, I think they passed away within 2 weeks of each other. He had a number of children and he was extremely wealthy. And he died in a way that seems really awful. So there are just no guarantees. I think we make a lot of choices in life believing that we have more control than we actually do, that this thing is going to give us a guarantee. But life is just way too unpredictable and often unfair for us to be able to say that this thing I'm about to do is definitely going to guarantee that that is something that's going to be available to me in this way later. All the different things that can happen where you might end up having a child where your care for them is going to be lifelong, right? That you are going to actually be the one who is going to be caring for them well into an age where you need to be cared for. Or a child who tragically passes away, or estrangement where you might have a child where you end up not speaking to them, you're not a part of each other's lives, where you might have a child who you have a great relationship with, but because they are their own autonomous person, they move in a direction in their life which means that they're not able to take care of you, or they choose not to, where their career might take them halfway around the world. There are so many things which just undercut the idea that this is a guarantee. Again, it's not an obligation, but it is, even if it is something that they would do, there's no guarantee that it's going to be available to you. And what a lot of child free by choice women in particular, because we are very good at building community and we are very good at sustaining long-term relationships and friendships, what a lot of child free women report, and even women with children report, is that in those older years, their support comes from their community, it comes from their friendships, it comes from their peers. And this is certainly something that I have witnessed over and over again throughout the course of my life, through the lens of my grandmother and her friends, now with my mum and her friends. Like, my mum just had a surgery, and even though I moved to her town, her friends, like, I'm like, when's your next appointment? When do you need to go to the physio? When do you need to go to the hydro pool? She's like, nope, got that covered. You know, this girlfriend's taking me on this day, and this person, two of her friends have come down to spend a few days with her to do a bit of shopping and running around and cooking and just hanging out and, you know, doing a little bit of that good social, healthy stuff together. And so I've been like saying, can I volunteer? Can I do something? I have obviously been helping, but her community is extraordinary, and she has a child, you know. So I think that this just speaks to these binaries that we put people like through these, into these categories of, if you are this, then that must mean you have access to this, which then means that we're even letting down people who do have children when they get into those ages, because we're probably making an assumption that they are cared for by their children, where they may not be, where they may really be suffering and struggling because they don't have the logistical support, but certainly the emotional and community support Where someone who doesn't have children might have to go to more of an effort to intentionally build those communities and friendships and to share what their needs are and to show up and be the village for other people as well. And so their needs are being met probably more readily and more easily than somebody who has people who are assuming that they are taken care of and that they're being visited, that they're being nurtured, that they're being like physically and medically monitored and taken care of. So there are no guarantees in life. This is certainly not a guarantee in life. Life can be cruel and unfair and tragic and unexpected. And I think, again, if this is a main contributor to having children, it's a really good opportunity to reflect. How did the people closest to you react when they found out about your choice? And did their opinions impact you? So I was really lucky. I think it's because the people who know me very well, that this really wouldn't come as a surprise with my personality type, the things that I enjoy doing, the way that I enjoy living. I'm a real homebody. At times I can be a real loner. Like I really like my alone time. I have a very rich inner life and a lot of like creativity and things that I enjoy doing, which really require a lot of alone time and reflection. I'm also a social animal, and particularly with the people who are really, really important to me. One thing that I am very good at is building long lasting friendships that are, lifelong and very, very close and rich and deep. But I like my own time and I like to do what I want to do and travel where I want to. And I love traveling by myself and going on holiday by myself. I love doing it with other people as well. But there's a real point of difference in those two experiences for me. So I don't think it would surprise anybody when I finally came to this decision. The person I was most worried about was probably my mum, because if I don't have children, then she's not going to have grandchildren. But especially with the state of the world and the way it's unfolding, I mean, she was, regardless, she was initially like very, very supportive, made it very clear, like, this is your life. You have to do what you want to do and need to do. And would it be lovely? Sure. But also, like, it's bloody hard. And in fact, after that conversation, she was so open with me about all of her personal challenges as a parent and all her true experiences as a parent over the years, which she otherwise might never have shared with me, which I have to encourage parents sensitively to potentially explore sharing with their kids their realities of being a parent as well, because it really, really helped me and it really has deepened our relationship in this new way where I don't listen to that and go, oh, so you saying you didn't want me? Because it's not what she's saying at all. But she just was very clear about, like, there are just sacrifices she has made, things she hasn't pursued, because obviously this is going to take the lion's share of your energy and focus and who you are as a person. So that's been really interesting, is like exploring that part of our relationship and her as a person in this whole new way. But then with the state of the world, the way that it is economically, politically, what we're seeing in terms of attitudes towards women, she and I often express the freedom and lack of anxiety that comes with no grandchild, no child, where we really are in a time where I can understand for parents how anxiety inducing, and I'm always with my community checking in with especially the mamas out there about those anxieties and about those fears and about how to cope with that and move through it. Because regardless of where your child sits on the spectrum of experiences, it is a scary time to be a parent. It is a scary time to be bringing kids into the world. And I am grateful that I waited, because I think even if I had desperately wanted to have children, I think if I did have that innate desire and that innate instinct, I think I still would have made the same choice because of the state of the world. That's just me. I can only speak for myself. So there is a very different way in which even my mum thinks about it now and experiences it. With my friends, super supportive, really supportive. Again, I think it's because they know me so well that it makes all the sense in the world why this would be the appropriate life choice for me. And again, like with my best girlfriend, she is able to now open up to me in a way about her experiences with parenthood that she hadn't previously, even though we share everything. I think it just gave her an extra level of permission to share really, really openly with me in terms of some of those challenges and more about sense of self and sense of identity, those sorts of things. Next question. What would you say to someone who feels as though being child free will welcome judgment or they won't fit in? I think one of the core tenets of my life applies here too, which is that you have to care more than you're scared. Like, you have to care about living the life you want to live. You have to care about meeting the outcomes that feel good to you more than you're scared of people judging you. Because here's the truth, like, people are going to judge you. People are judgmental. They are human. They are flawed. They're not always judgmental and they're not all super judgmental, but it's true that people are judgmental, especially when they're at their worst points of their life. I notice that I'm more judgmental when I'm being most judgmental towards myself. You can't control other people's judgment of you. All you can control is how much it impacts you and whether or not that's connecting with an inner judgment of yourself, and your own critical self is being fed by that. So the idea that you can do anything to prevent people's judgment is a total fallacy. It's just, what are they going to judge you for, right? So it's understandable that this would be scary because it is still taboo and it does invite a lot of questions which are uncomfortable. And here's the other thing, it makes other people uncomfortable too. It brings to attention things that people don't think about, and it makes them think about it, and maybe makes them think about things that then make them really, really uncomfy about the choices they've made. Not always, but it can just hit a little bit close to home. I even have gone through this in regards to my eating disorder recovery or what I do professionally. I notice that sometimes, not a lot, but sometimes, what I do for a living will make somebody else very, very uncomfortable because maybe they have their own issues with food or their body or an eating disorder or disordered eating or compulsive dieting or exercise. And so if I talk about this stuff so openly and I talk about my experience and I highlight that it was a problem and it almost killed me, and they are not ready to address that their experience is similar and they don't think about it in a similar way, talking to me is probably going to make them think about it in a way that they're not comfortable, right? So if somebody has just kind of stumbled down this path of becoming a parent and following like this nuclear family blueprint that we're all told is just normal and that's what everyone's supposed to do, and they speak to somebody who has rejected that and moved outside of that social conformity, that's really uncomfortable for people who maybe belong in that regretful parents subreddit, right? So I always take judgment as an opportunity to sort of step back and look at where it might be coming from. I very rarely immediately take it personally or take it to heart. I usually see it as an indicator of what's going on with the other person. And again, that's a judgment, right? So we're all human, we're all imperfect, we're all going to judge at times. In terms of not fitting in, I think that that's where the growing need for community in these different experiences, in these different spaces, is so important, which is something I certainly want to work towards, being able to create spaces where child-free people can build community and share their experiences, and where they want to, like, be more of a village maybe for the people in their lives who do have children, and making sure that you're connected to content and, like I said, online communities or in real life communities, which mean that you're sharing experiences with people who have shared values and shared life paths with you. Because I think that this would be really uncomfortable to be surrounded by people who are in families and do have children and don't understand your viewpoint. Of course, that would make you question yourself. If you reverse it, it would be the same way. If you were the only person to have children in a group of child-free people, it would make you feel like the outlier. It would make you feel quite strange. And it would make you really question your decisions and why you were so different. So I think that definitely through whatever avenue, being able to find resources and communities which normalize your decisions and your choices is really important. I found some really great creators online who talk about being child-free. I think that you've got to go through some of those hashtags and some of those creators, because some of them talk about it through a lens where I'm like, oh, I don't really like people who talk about like not liking children, which is their prerogative. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't really speak to me. Or who really reject the idea of being part of the village, also their prerogative, but that doesn't really speak to me. Being able to access things which reflect your experience and your values and your intentions, very, very important. And again, just realizing that if your goal in life is to try to prevent other people from judging you, you might as well pack up your stuff and go to the North Pole and try to meet Santa. But you're going to be very, very disappointed because he doesn't live there. He doesn't exist, for anyone not aware. Same thing, trying to get to an outcome where nobody ever judges you and totally co-signs all of your experiences and all of your choices. That will never, ever happen. But it comes back to that original metaphor of how do you want your life to feel versus how you want it to look. Do you want everyone else to be really happy with your life while you're miserable in it? Yeah. But yeah, these are obviously still very, very sensitive topics. I even have a hesitation sometimes about talking about it on TikTok or here, because I think people hear my choices or other people's choices and see it as a rejection of their choices. It's not. It's just trying to make space for all the different options and put all of the information on the table to be able to say, here's what's out there. Here's all the data. Now try to match that up with your needs and your desires and your goals and who you want to be, and most importantly, how you want your life to feel. So we will definitely revisit these topics in the future. I have people lined up who we're going to be talking to about their experiences, where they do come from different philosophies and reasoning for why they might have made these decisions. And also wanting to talk to parents about their reasons for choosing parenthood and those challenges that come with that. But as always, would love to hear your thoughts, would love to hear your input. Always happy to hear any suggestions for episodes or people who you want me to chat to. And yeah, just love being able to come together every couple of weeks to have these discussions. Like I said, come and find us over on Patreon. All of my socials will be in the description box below. And have a beautiful couple of weeks. I will see you very soon.